perspectives. And I think it's much like the Gospels. You know, when you read the Gospels, they're all written by different men, and yet when you read all of them, you get a little something different, and it tells the whole story. And so we're very honored today to have Rachael Jacobs with us. Rachael is a dear friend of Amy and mine. She saved my life. Your building is here today because of her, what the Lord did through her. And she has consented to come and share with us today some of what happened in that airport. And she's going to challenge you to do 2 or 3 things that would be good for you to take note of before it's over with. And then Amy's going to come and talk about God's providence and God's goodness, the way that He took care of us and our family during that time. I used Psalm 23 on purpose, because there's one verse in that passage that says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." I've been down that valley. I get a little jealous at times when I hear those songs about heaven, because I came about as close as you can get, and yet God wasn't finished with me, and God decided to keep me here a while longer. 3 years last Sunday. We celebrated 3 years, my anniversary, when I suffered a massive heart attack in the Midway Airport, Chicago. So I'm going to give you a little bit of testimony, and I'm going to lead up to that, what took place in the gate area, and then Rachael will come and talk about some things that she wants to share, and then Amy will follow her, and then I'll come and tie it all together, and then I'm going to point out some reasons why all this is a miracle. So I'm going to read a little bit of this because I want to say it the right way. The morning began like many for this preacher. I'd shaved and showered and packed, and I was ready to catch a plane home to Nashville. I just finished an enjoyable 4 days of ministry in Michigan. Ron and Jean and Joe had welcomed me into their church pulpits. God had blessed in each of those services, and it was great to see and preach to so many men I'd come to know and appreciate at the Michigan State Ministers and Laymen's Retreat. I preached 7 times in 4 days and enjoyed each opportunity. By the way, never had a pain, never had an issue. Joe picked me up that morning at the hotel. We stopped by a local diner for a great breakfast and then on to the airport. I boarded the plane and it pushed away from the gate. The pilot announced that our plane would need the icing before it could take off. I had a short connection time in Chicago, and I was periodically looking at my watch as we waited our turn. Finally, after 40 minutes, we raced down the runway and were airborne. The flight was uneventful, but I had a nagging concern that I might miss my connection in Chicago. I exited the plane and quickly realized, by the way it always is, that my connection flight was on the opposite end of the airport. I almost ran to the other side of the airport. Relief. The Nashville flight was delayed as well and had not yet boarded. I'd made my connection. I parked my computer bag, pulled off my winter coat, reached for my cell phone, then woke up in the emergency room of Holy Cross Hospital. At that point, Rachael Jacobs came on the scene. I want you all to give Rachael a warm Cambridge welcome as she comes to tell us some things to us. Rachael.
Probably better with the defibrillator than I was with this. Before I get going with my story, would you guys like me to point out the exits? That's a pretty good one. Okay. Do you guys want to do it with me? Because this is my first time here. Inside. Keep your chairs in the upright position. It's a real story. Well, as Roy was speaking of that day in Chicago, I met Roy, Rachael met Roy. I was on my day off and living in Chicago. I had gone I was going to visit my parents. So all day that day, I thought, well, I'll take a later flight. I had my bags packed, and I remember thinking, my bags are packed. Why don't I just go now? So I got on the train, and I went to the airport, and I thought, well, I might can make that plane that's up there on the board right now if I run. So I ran, and got to the gate area. And so made it in time, and as Ray said, the plane was running late. So I was chit-chatting with the gate agent, just kind of seeing how her day was going. And the man ran up and said, there's a gentleman that's very sick. So I ran over to him, and Roy was there. And he was in the chair, and the chair had an arm, like a brace on it, and Roy had his arm under it and had been stuck. So he was having a seizure. So I yelled at everybody to please help me get him out of the chair. I thought at the time that he was having a diabetic seizure or maybe epileptic seizure, because I had always thought that was the only thing that causes seizures. So I yelled, and to back up just a minute, we were taught often that if someone's having a seizure, they've had them before. And when they come out of it, they're going to be embarrassed, so don't draw a lot of attention to them. Well, I ignored that altogether. So I just started yelling, please help me, get him out of the chair, help, help, I need help. So when I did, some people came over and they helped me get him out of the chair, and we got him on the floor. So I braced to make sure he didn't thrash into anything, because he was really having a seizure. He was foaming at the mouth. I thought he was, in fact, dying. So I checked him, and he didn't have any bracelet that would appear that he was diabetic. So it just hit me, defibrillator. Now, before that, I had never associated a seizure with a defibrillator or with a heart attack. But I saw a flight attendant coming down the way, and we were waiting at gate 11 for our plane, and there was a plane over there. So she was coming, and I yelled at her, go to that plane, get the defibrillator and the oxygen and the emergency kit, run, get it off that plane before it leaves. And again, I'm yelling, is there help? Please help me. So at that time, a doctor was in the gate area. He came over, and also a nurse. We got the defibrillator, the oxygen, and the EMK, which is a medical kit that we needed. It has blood pressure cuffs and some other things in it. An ops agent, when he heard me say defibrillator, he grabbed it off the wall, and so he came with it. So we have it on Roy. They take him, they shock him. He never comes back to life. He's still unconscious. So the paramedics get there, and they take him away. And I thought he died. And so my supervisor comes up at that point, and I said, he's alone, and nobody's going with him, and he just died. And he is somebody, and he doesn't deserve to die by himself. And I just got to go. So I got a taxi, and I called my mom on the phone because I was scared, and I was crying, and I was scared. And a man just died in my arms, and I didn't even get a chance to ever have a talk with him before that. I had his card in my, I went through his wallet. I didn't take any money. Wasn't any. But I knew his name, and I had my ID, my Southwest ID, and I thought, what am I going to say when I get to this hospital where this man is that has just died? So I said, well, I don't know, I'm praying, call my mom, like I said, and I say, what do? I don't know, I'm alone. And my mother said, you know what to do. So I say I grew up in that taxi. I held on to my badge, and I had the thought for a moment, am I intruding on someone's personal family life? Should I be here? And I pushed past that thought, and I thought, no, if this was my family, I would want someone to go with them and care about them. And when someone dies in your arms, they are your family. So I am his family. So I pushed past. I went to the hospital not knowing what I'd see. So I walk in. Roy is alive. He's back. And so they rush me in to where he is, and they say he doesn't remember anything. So I say, hi, I'm the flight attendant that worked on you, and you were a little bit sick. So we talked a minute about that. And I told him kind of what happened, and he would forget. He just couldn't remember at the time. So they came to do some tests on him. So I walked away to the corner, and I was crying because I thought I didn't get the oxygen on him in time, and that he would forever have brain damage, and he would never be the same. And I felt like it was my fault because I didn't get the oxygen on him in time. But I knew whatever this day led to, that I would be in it for the long run. And if it meant he was going to live in a nursing home and he couldn't remember anything, then that's just where I'd be living to. Because God committed me to him. And so he had his BlackBerry, and he wanted to call his wife. And I was afraid that his wife would be afraid that he couldn't remember anything. But as I was crying, and as I'd stepped away, a nurse came over to me, and she was a very busy nurse. And I said, I gave him brain damage. And she said, Rachel, how did you give him brain damage? And I said, well, I didn't get the oxygen on him in time, and it's my fault. So she hugged me in a way, and she was a really tough nurse. I don't think she hugged a lot of people. But she hugged me, and she said, oh, that's normal. He'll remember that. Your mind doesn't allow you to remember what happened to you until you're ready. And I didn't know that before. And so when I realized that, yeah, he's going to be back, I was very happy to say the least. So go back, Roy's BlackBerry wants to call his wife. So now that I know he's going to remember the things again, I know I can tell her if they have a conversation and he's forgetting things. So I say to him, I need to take your phone and get better reception outside. And I thought for a second, I kind of just lied to a Baptist preacher. Then it's bigger picture, it's okay. But I didn't want to say in front of him what was going on. So I talked to Roy, or I talked to Amy, we get on the phone. And Amy says, does he remember me? And I remember that like it was yesterday. And I said, yes, he remembers you. He just doesn't remember what is going on now. So I stayed with him until I got there. And we had lots of talks. And Roy said, you should go. And I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying until your family gets here. And he said he didn't want to be in any trouble. And I said, well, you know what? People need to be needed. And you need to let us take care of you. You don't always need to be the person that takes care of everyone. We all need to be needed. So I stayed. And then his family came. And I'll let Amy tell you about the rest when I came back. I don't do that, okay. But I want to say one thing to you guys, that there was a story about when Rachel met Roy that Southwest did. It's an audio of both of us. There could be another story on that day, and it could be when Rachel met Rachel. Because I learned that day that there is a you inside of you that you may have never met. It's not the you that you live with every day that forgets what you had for breakfast, or why you walk into the room and you have no idea why you're there, why you go to the car and you just don't have car keys. That's the you I live with every day. That's not the one I'm talking about. The you that lives inside of you doesn't sweat the small stuff. The you that lives inside of you is God and love. And that you lives straight in your heart. And that you shows up when that you needs to. That's strong. That's a smart you. And it remembers things and does things and will help you accomplish a mission that you have never been trained to do. Will help you love a man that's dying on the floor that you have never known. That you shows up. So if you're like me and you forget what you had for breakfast and you think, how would I react in a situation like that? You will. You're there. And some of you have probably had hard things, so you've had to meet that person before. But if you haven't, I just have to say, that person is there. So just keep love and God in your heart. And that is what's going to guide you to do the things that you need to do. So now I have a big family. Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me too. I love our story, and I love that we're here to tell it, and that Roy is here to tell it today. So So I guess I'm going to introduce Amy now. You all know her anyway. Thank you, guys.
Roy often says you never know what a day will hold. And 3 years ago, at the end of January, I had just an ordinary day in my office in Lebanon. And I was kind of watching the clock because I was expecting a phone call from Roy, and when he changed flights in the Midway airport, and then I would pick him up in Nashville. And that was going to be part of my day. Well, I noticed that the time had gone by and he hadn't called me, and I checked the computer, and sure enough, his flight had already left for Nashville, so I was kind of in a quandary. But I thought, well, he just probably got hung up in Michigan and his flight was delayed. And so I continued on at work, but, just had that in the back of my mind, not sure what time I'll be going to the airport to get him. Well, I got a phone call. Southwest Airlines was kind enough to work pretty hard to track me down. And I finally got a phone call that there was a medical emergency. Roy had had a medical emergency, and he was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I don't know, I can remember it so clearly, but I don't know how you can explain how you feel in that moment, where your knees go out from you and you just are completely panicked and you don't feel like yourself at all. At that point, I had heard that Roy had a seizure, and so I was thinking maybe stroke. Nobody had said heart attack at this time, and his dad had had a stroke, so I think that's why I was probably wondering if he could remember me and if there was brain damage and that kind of thing. And I can't remember if I knew that he had regained consciousness until I talked to somebody at the ER, a nurse or Rachael. But that part sort of became a blur in the panic. But what I do remember so clearly is the Southwest agent, Nikki, saying, "Can you be on the 4:40 p.m. flight to Chicago?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Who else needs to come with you?" And I said, "He has 2 grown children. They need to come too." And they said, "Just give me their phone numbers and we'll arrange their flights for them. We'll meet you at the gate." I walked into the National Airport at the Southwest ticket sales area, and they said, "Are you Mrs. Harris?" It was amazing. Missy and I got on at that flight. Aaron came on the later flight. When we got off the flight in Chicago, again we were met, this time by Nikki, who had all of Roy's belongings, his jacket, his computer bag. And they escorted us down to the taxi area. They gave us vouchers for the taxi and hotel vouchers and cell phone numbers. Call us if you need anything at all. I can remember being on that plane ride with Missy and the complete difference I felt from first hearing the news to now being en route to see Roy. Just a complete peace that we had settled in. And that peace really remained with us throughout the whole extended, it was over a week that we were in Chicago. By that time, people had started praying for us, and I was praying, the family was praying. The power of the Lord just calmed all those nerves. I don't know if I've got enough time to say the blessing after blessing after blessing that we received in Chicago. getting into the ER and having Rachel stay there with Roy. I think that was one thing that just kind of settled me completely, knowing that she was with him and taking care of him until Missy and I got there. And once we were there, the Free Will Baptist Church in Chicago, David Poteet's church, they came, and he came and prayed with us. They did our laundry. They took us places, fed us, really took care of us. After Roy's surgery, Rachel came on back up. She flew up again on her day off, rented a car, came out to the hospital, visited with Roy, and then took me to her apartment. Those of you that have been to Chicago and in Michigan Avenue, she lived in a high-rise overlooking the lake, and it was just breathtaking. And she said, if you need to recover, if Roy needs to recover, you can have my apartment as long as you need. So she just completely opened up her heart and her life to us. Just the whole time we were in Chicago, we just received blessing after blessing after blessing. And I'm so thankful to God that He took care of Roy in the airport and then in the hospital, with all the fantastic doctors and nurses that he had there. We're just completely blessed.
I'm going to take back up when I woke up in the ER. When I woke up, I didn't know where I was, didn't know what had happened. When I opened my eyes, seated next to me was this nice lady whom I did not recognize. She introduced herself as Rachael Jacobs and said she was a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines. I believe I asked her where I was and what was happening a number of times. And she began to recount the story over and over again. And the story is nothing short of a miracle. I perked up in the ER, and the personnel at first couldn't believe I'd suffered a heart attack. I mean, I'm my normal self, I'm pretty much like this most of the time, and I just kind of perked up, and they took the blood work anyway. And sure enough, the blood work confirmed that indeed I'd suffered a massive heart attack. Heart catheterization was scheduled for the next morning, and the cardiologist shared his findings. He said, "Reverend Harris, you should not be here. You should be in the morgue." Similar words to that effect. He said, "You don't smoke, you don't drink, have no blood pressure issues, you're not obese, no cholesterol problems." He said, "Overall, you're in great health." He said, "But you got one big problem." He said, "You've got what they call the widowmaker. You're like an athlete that runs every day and is in good physical shape, and yet they find him on the side of the road, dead of a heart attack. No apparent symptoms, yet major heart issues are present," he said. Then he began to describe what they found in the arteriogram. So the main artery feeding the left side of your heart is 99% blocked. You also have another artery that's 90% blocked. You have two more that are 70% blocked. And you have another one that's 30% blocked. You have 5 blockages in all. We've inserted an artificial pump into the chamber of your heart to relieve stress. And we want you to lay perfectly still through the weekend to gain enough strength so that we can perform quadruple bypass surgery on Monday. Surgery was performed on Monday. By the way, Monday was February 2nd, which is Groundhog Day, which is also my daughter's birthday. So from now on, when you think of Groundhog Day, you think of me in my surgery. Surgery normally takes 6 to 8 hours. My surgery took 3. The report was great. And by that evening, they'd removed the respirator tube. I was sitting up in the bed eating jello. Saturday morning, by the way, surgery was on Monday. On Saturday morning, we boarded a plane back to Nashville. 4 days later, I met with the cardiologist, my new cardiologist. They took pictures from every angle of my heart. And as we discussed those pictures, the doctor could not believe what he had found. He said, there's absolutely no damage to your heart. I said, I don't understand it. By the way, 9 days after surgery, I had mentioned to him about maybe doing rehab in Lebanon, since there was a rehab place there and all that. He said, I'll sign the order. He said, but the truth is, he said, you're farther along than most people who have gone through rehab. Explain that. Then I popped a question to him. I said, I'm scheduled to speak in 3 weeks from tomorrow in California at the Free Baptist State Men's Retreat. Can I go? He let me go. I was getting terrible looks from the lady over there in red. And she knew I was going to ask, and she was hoping the doctor would say no. And he told me if I wouldn't lift anything, he said, you can't lift your computer bag to put it over the thing in the plane. He said, you can't lift your clothes to put them on the carousel. He said, you can't do anything. He said, you get people to do that. I said, I'll do it. He said, will you promise me you'll take a 1 to 2 hour nap every day? I said, I'll do it. He said, will you promise me you'll have a stool so that you can sit down and preach the stool? And I said, I'll do it. Well, God blessed. I went to California by myself. We saw 6 men saved at that retreat. Over 50 rededications. You've heard quite an unusual story. And God truly performed a miracle. But what makes it a miracle? Several things, I think, make it a miracle. First of all, normally I do not make connections when I go to Detroit. I think Rachel will tell you there are a lot of direct flights that go from Nashville Airport to Midway. To Detroit. There's no reason for me to go to the Midway Airport. I didn't go to it on the way up, but I had a divine appointment on the way back in the Midway Airport. It called for a divine connection in Chicago. Secondly, Rachael Jacobs just happened to get on an early flight that was delayed. God placed her there. She deviated from the normal procedure, which normally happens whenever you're having the kind of problem they thought I was having. Normally a seizure, you lay the person out, you let them recover. But she'll tell you, it was almost as though a voice told her, get the defibrillator. Well, by the way, I believe somebody did tell her. She got the defibrillator, and as normal with me, I'm a little stubborn, so they had to shock me twice. They did, I don't remember any of that. I do remember waking up in that ER. By the way, it just so happened there was a doctor and a nurse on that flight as well. By the way, it just so happened that doctor was a cardiologist. A nurse was an ER nurse. I'm sure you'd say that's just coincidence. No, I don't think so. Thirdly, God timed the heart attack perfectly on the ground, rather than on the plane I was just getting off of or the plane I was just about to get on. Fourthly, I just mentioned it, that she deviated from the standard procedure to deliver a shot that saved my life. Fifthly, I suffered no permanent heart or brain damage, other than the brain damage I already had before all this took place. Despite having been deprived of oxygen, blood flow to the brain for several minutes. Sixthly, my recovery fast-tracked, and I believe it fast-tracked by the Lord. In less than 5 weeks from the day of the heart attack, I preached 3 sermons in 2 churches and 4 sermons at a state men's retreat in 4 days. Finally, God used this episode to touch countless lives throughout the country and around the world, for that matter, through that radio interview that Rachel and I did. By the way, they allowed me to leave my testimony in that. That's not normally the thing that happens. But the one thing she did tell you, it's become the most listened to episode of anything they've ever had on Southwest Radio, which tells me God continues to use it. Now, I'll tell you this, I didn't see a bright light. I didn't travel down a dark tunnel. But But one thing I can tell you for sure, I experienced the protecting, guiding hand of the Lord. I never feared death. I felt His divine presence and His peace that passes all understanding. I've experienced great joys and great disappointments in life. But God has been with me every step of the way. By the way, take it from one who's passed from death unto life, not only spiritually, but also in my case, physically as well. Every good and perfect gift comes down from the Lord. Life is a precious gift. Cherish it each day and live it like it might be your last. One of these days, it will be. And if you have your doubts, just remember God's miracle in Chicago. Now, my question to you is this. If that had been you in that airport, and Rachael Jacobs hadn't been there, and you suffered a seizure, and they misdiagnosed it, not knowing any different, and you died of that heart attack, where would you be right now? I could lay down and die.